Well, it's the seventh day of Christmas, as it says on your order of worship, which we all know as for 7 swans a-swimming. I looked it up, though. There are other versions of the song. Amongst the people of the Faroe Islands, they say that there are the 7 dishes, meaning of food, on the 7th day of Christmas. The French speak of 7 windmills. But it's the 7 part that matters. It's the 7th day, like the last day in the fabled 7 days of creation. Did you know, though, that if you sang the whole song and brought all the gifts, do you know how many gifts you would bring ultimately? 364. 1 minus a year. And so today, on the 365th day of the year, we make one last gift of worship for the year 2017. It's a gift of worship that is the leftovers from the whole year, all the stuff left in the refrigerator of church, the things in the back, the stuff you only ate a little part of, the stuff that you guiltily eat when people aren't watching. This is a church day of leftovers, tasty, guilt-ridden leftovers. And so we start with a song I like to do. It's one I like to tell a story about. Once in Royal David City is very much a part of the British tradition of Christmas music. It often is the beginning of a ceremony of a ceremony called Lessons and Carols. Have you ever seen it on TV or attended? And in classic British tradition, it is sung by a boy soprano for the first verse, as the choir comes marching in behind him, and then come the clergy and what my friend used to call slovenly grandeur with their robes wafting back and forth. I did this at least 2 or 3 times when I was in the town of Groton, Massachusetts, where there's a fancy boys' school with a fancy Anglican-style chapel, and the chaplain always invited me to come be one of the clergy who read one of the lesson. He almost always had me saying the lesson from Isaiah that talked about playing on the hole of the asp, just to see if I'd get the P out. At any rate, we're all lined up to go out and down this long aisle in this huge sanctuary, and the boy is singing the soprano, and people are in rapture, and he leans over to me, knowing I am a skeptic, and says, "I hate this thing." And yet the song is beautiful. Once in Royal David City is the story of the Christmas story. I think we're only going to sing 1 or 2. We're going to sing all 3 verses, it would appear. That's fine. Now, I want you to imagine you're in a great big Anglican cathedral, and there are little boy sopranos coming down the aisle, and all the clergy are wafting back and forth, and you can smell the incense and see the candles. And let us join in singing Once in Royal David City. It is our custom to do a responsive invocation, to share words of inspiration for ourselves and others. This passage comes actually from an Islamic poet out of India, Sa'adi. And you'll notice he's saying the same thing we heard in the hymn. To worship God is nothing other than to serve the people. It does not need rosaries, prayer carpets, or robes. All peoples are members of the same body, created from one essence. If fate brings suffering to one, the others cannot stay at rest. Like it or not, we know that true faith and true religion is to seek the well-being of others alongside ourselves. And we come here to be restored to that vision, renewed in its hope, and replenished for the work before us. Fountain Street Church has been trying to do just that for about 150 years. We'll be celebrating our 150th anniversary in just a little more than a year, in 2019. It has always been dedicated to the living of the gospel rather than more than the believing of it. The command to follow in the footsteps of Jesus rather than to wonder about who he was in some esoteric sense. I grew up in a church where we were told we were here to practice the religion of Jesus, not the religion about him. I think that's very true for Fountain Street Church, even for those who would say they don't know whether there is a God or not, but they certainly believe that the message embedded in there of caring for one another, of looking for liberty and justice in every corner, of serving those who need the most help, and giving the gifts we all have would be what we are here to do. That's Fountain Street Church. My name is Fred Wooden. I work here. but I'm also a member here, and I believe very much in what we do together. That's all I'm going to say in terms of welcome, except to welcome our wonderful musical guest. We don't know Casey, but I heard you warm up, so I'm looking forward to your song, and I'm really grateful that Robert Byron's is to give him the support only a wonderful accompanist can. Let's welcome Casey and Robert as they provide music for us this morning.
I've got a roof over my head, got a warm place to sleep. Some nights I lie awake counting gifts instead of counting sheep. I've got a heart that can hold love. I've got a mind that can think. There may be times when I lose the light and let my spirit sink, but I can't stay depressed when I remember how I'm blessed. Grateful, grateful, truly grateful I am. Grateful, truly blessed, and duly grateful. In a city of strangers, I've got a family of friends. No matter what rocks or brambles fill the way, I know that they will stay until the end. I feel a hand holding my hand. It's not a hand you can see, but on the road to the promised land, this hand will shepherd me through delight and despair, holding tight and always there. Grateful, grateful, truly grateful I am. Grateful, grateful, truly blessed, and duly grateful. It's not that I don't want a lot, or hope for more, or dream of more, but giving thanks for what I've got makes me so much happier than keeping score. In a world that can bring pain, I will still take each chance, for I believe that whatever the terrain, our feet can learn to dance, whatever stone life may sling. We can moan or we can sing. Grateful, grateful, truly grateful I am. Grateful, grateful, truly blessed, and duly grateful. Truly blessed and duly grateful.
I think we're grateful too. That was lovely. Thank you so much. And we'll hear a little more later, I think, aren't we? That's great. An old story. An old story, in this case, it says it's by me. It's not. It's by Charles Dickens. Maybe some of you have seen that movie, The Man Who Invented Christmas. Have you seen it? It's actually the story of Charles Dickens writing A Christmas Carol, because he did that in order to rescue Christmas from ignominy. In Great Britain, in England notably, Christmas was a time for getting very drunk, very rowdy, and very out of bounds. And it was looked down upon. And Mr. Dickens thought, no, it had more domestic power in it, if only he could find a way to say so. It should be pointed out that he was attending a very liberal congregation at that time. He was a member of the Essex Unitarian Chapel as a younger adult and wrote it during his time of membership there. So we can claim a little influence over him, perhaps. And he wrote this book in order to create Christmas as a family holiday, and he succeeded wildly. It was his first big hit. And whenever he lectured, he would read excerpts from it aloud, and sometimes would read a shortened version all the way through. I'm not reading from that, but I am reading from the fourth stave, The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. And if you're on tenterhooks when I stop, grab a cup of coffee afterward, and I'll finish the story in the Kiel Lounge. For those who haven't been around, I've been reading this sequentially for the last several weeks, but you all know the story. But sometimes his words do better than any movie. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come, said Scrooge. The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand. You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us, Scrooge pursued. Is that so, Spirit? The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received. Although well used to ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit paused a moment, as observing his condition and giving him time to recover. But Scrooge was all the worse for this. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there were ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he, though he stretched his own to the utmost, could see nothing but a spectral hand and one great heap of black. "Ghost of the future," he exclaimed, "I fear you more than any specter I have seen, but as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company, and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?" It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. "Lead on," said Scrooge. "Lead on, the night is waning fast, and it is precious to me, I know. Lead on, spirit." The phantom moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadows of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and encompass them of its own act. But there they were in the heart of it, on exchange, amongst the merchants who hurried up and down and chinked their money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at their watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. "No," said a man with a monstrous chin. "I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead. Last night, I believe." "Why, what was the matter with him?" asked another, taking a vast quantity of snuff out of a large snuff box. "I thought he'd never die." "God knows," said the first with a large yawn. "What has he done with his money?" asked a red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence on the end of his nose that shook like the gills of a turkey cock. "I haven't heard," said the man with the large chin, yawning again. "Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know." This pleasantry was received with a general laugh. "It's likely to be a very cheap funeral," said the same speaker, "for upon my life I don't know anybody who will go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer." "I don't mind going if a lunch is provided," observed the gentleman with the excrescence upon his nose. "But I must be fed if I am to go." There was another laugh. "Well, I am the most disinterested of you all," said the first speaker, "for I never wear black gloves and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye." Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The phantom glided out onto the street. Its finger pointed to two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking the explanation might lie here. He knew these men also perfectly. They were men of business, very wealthy and of great importance. He made it a point always of standing well in their esteem. In a business point of view, that is, strictly in a business point of view. "How are you?" said one. "How are you?" said the other. "Well," said the first, "Old Scratch finally got his last one, eh?" "So I'm told," said the second. "Cold, isn't it?" "No, seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose?" No. Something else to think of. Good morning." Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial. But feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost's province was the future. Nor could he think of anyone immediately connected with himself to whom he could apply them. But nothing doubting that to whomsoever they applied, they had some latent moral for his own improvement. He resolved to treasure up every word he heard and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared, for he had an expectation that the conduct of his future self would give him the clue he missed and would render the solution to these riddles easy. He looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner. And though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured in through the porch. It gave him little surprise, however, for he had been resolving in his mind a change of life, and thought and hoped he saw his newborn resolutions carried out in this. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom with outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of the hand and its situation in reference to himself that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder and feel very cold. I'll resume this story after church. I want you to notice the banners above me. I only get to look at them when I get to sit out there, and I think, wow, they're really great. For many years, this church has designated each Sunday and Advent with a theme: faith, hope, love, and joy. And you can, if you look carefully, you can see the words at the bottom of each of the four banners. They're built into the scene, but it is a scene, and it proceeds across from left to right, where it's still a bit of fall right there with the leaves on the far left. Where you see faith, you can see that there's still leaves. And I think that's apt because we know that the leaves will come back. And then as you go further across, winter comes along, and the two on the left are hung, faith and hope. Then the two on the right, love and joy. And then on the fourth Sunday in Advent, the wide one was added. This year it was the same day, Christmas Eve, and shall we say on Christmas Eve, the wide one is hung that has the star. See the star? And then on the Sunday after that, when we begin to think about the visit of the wise people, the last one, which you can see there on the left, of those three people helping themselves up over a ridge like that. They'll be gone by next week, and you won't see them for a year. So I want you to take them in and appreciate the artist, a member of this church, Elizabeth DeBraber, who is a silk artist and made these for us. This is at least the third, if not the fourth, set of banners that have graced this church in the years we have honored Advent. So I wanted to lift up that gift and give you a little story that went with it. And sure enough, the snowflakes on the right are very much a part of our lives now. I'm going to tell a new story now. A new story is one that I created. And I did this for years in my previous churches, especially on this Sunday when sermons felt a little too formal. So it is a story of my own creation, but it arises out of experiences in my own life, observances, not my own life, but what I have observed, turned into perhaps something worth remembering. The hammer dropped good, satisfying blows. The nails bit deeply, and Ken worked with the easy rhythm of someone familiar with tools and confident in their use. After several years, the house and barn were his, and he was building this connector, this addition that made it easier to go between the two in winter. In doing this, he was following a long-standing New England pattern where winters are long and cold, and you'd rather leave your boots in a mudroom than track them into the kitchen. It had actually been a year of additions. Little Hank showed up in February. The mortgage was signed in June, and starting in October, yes, this mudroom began to go up. And though Thanksgiving was past, Ken was still giving thanks to all the powers that could be, for this had been the best of years. Ken was so intent on his work that he didn't notice it was dusk until he missed a nail in the half-light. It pleased him to be able to throw a self-wired switch and fill the room with light. In a matter of moments, he was done. Oh, there was still some finish work on the wainscoting and the molding. The varnish would have to wait until spring, but the room was tight and dry, and when he got the stove lit, it was warm. And that's what he did. A christening of sorts, don't you think, when you light the first fire in a stove or a fireplace and bring it to life, warming all the living things. "Come on in," Ken hollered, and Eleanor came in with Hank on her hip as she came through the door. He was barefoot and red-cheeked and gnawed on his little knuckle. By the light of the open stove, Ken tilted back in his chair, hands behind his bed, the smug smile of completion on his face. Eleanor's face opened into a big toothy smile, and as she bent over to kiss him, Hank reached for Ken, which tilted him just far enough back that he fell all the way back onto the floor. Little Hank laughed, and Ken winced, but he couldn't help laughing as well. Eleanor shook her head. "Couldn't you give a fellow a hand?" he said to her. So mussed with straw, and Hank all but falling onto the unfinished floor, they quickly hurried back into the kitchen. Ken absently reached back to turn off the light and close the door. Ken awakened from slumber very suddenly. It must have been a dream, for the room was still and dark, and he could hear both Eleanor and Hank sleeping nearby. He lay back down to settle himself when he saw a funny shadow moving on the ceiling. Getting up from bed, he went to the window, looked down to the new addition. He saw some faint light flickering from the window, the light of a fire. Not 5 minutes passed between that sight and Ken bundling Eleanor and Hank into the pickup in the driveway. The fire department was called, but was 15 minutes away, even during the best of days, and doubtless more when the volunteers had to be roused from their bed. In that time, he had to decide which to save, the house or the barn. There was no real choice, of course, but that did not make it easy. Axe blows rained down on the clapboards he had nailed just days before, and tears rained down upon his cheeks as he obliterated the building he had just spent a month and a half building. He didn't even notice the fire engines when they came, or that he was joined by 5 other fellows who then helped him tear it down and poured water on the rest in a vain attempt to save the barn, which was unsuccessful. Eleanor and Hank sat up in the pickup, wrapped up in blankets, shivering. Little Hank slept, and Eleanor wished that she could sleep, but the cold and the shock was more than enough to keep her awake. She watched as they fought to keep the fire from the house, and they did in fact succeed. Only the faintest smoke and scorch mark was left in the V shape of the roof that had been torn off. The barn and the mudroom were gone. And the sheep. Well, Ken had roused them but couldn't be sure they all got out. He sensed that some had not escaped but tried not to think about it until after the fire was out. The fire department left about 10 in the morning. After they made sure it was safe to go back in, Eleanor and Hank watched them through a smoky window. Eleanor hugged him close, silently thankful for his innocent happiness. Well, soon Ken was building again. This time he built a lean-to against the house because the ewes were close to lambing and they need a place to give birth. The cold grew brittle and his hands grew numb, but he had no choice. He found room for his rams with his next-door neighbor and space for the yearlings with another. But he had to keep the ewes because, yes, they would be lambing in a few weeks and maybe sooner. And that meant they needed the shelter. This was, in fact, his herd. So Ken was building a lean-to, making it into a true salt box of a house. He put it right where the addition had been. He used the same sills, in fact. Might as well get some use out of them, he said. Ramshackle and ugly, it worked. Old blankets hung inside that dampened the drafts that roared through the cracks in the walls. A few light bulbs hung down, swinging in the wind. It was awful, but little Hank thought it was just grand as he stood at the child gate between the kitchen and the lean-to and watched his father building it. He would gaze at Ken and the ewes, and as Ken went in and out, he stepped over Hank each time, at which Hank would reach up and try to grab his father as he went by. But only little Hank found anything to love in this arrangement. The smell was creeping into the whole house, to say nothing of the more tangible evidence of sheep. Straw found its way into their bed, and laundry was found in the stable. All of this was almost tolerable, but Christmas week, when Ken was plowing the drive and Eleanor was spinning the wool, Hank chose that moment to learn how to open the gate and visit the lean-to by himself. Ken quickly invented a Hank-proof system which created a great deal of crying, but much less anxiety. Like the shed, it was nothing elegant, but it did the job, and little Hank, though crestfallen, was now safe. Christmas morning was their first day of rest. There was plenty to do, but for today it could wait. God even sweetened the weather so that the sheep could be in the frozen meadow and pluck at a little bit of the grass. Little Hank wasn't quite sure what it was all about, but he was ever cheerful, and that was a blessing. So much, and yet so little. So much had been taken, and yet so little. Near noon, the Potters knocked on the door. "Merry Christmas," they said, but not merrily. "Listen," said Glenn, his neighbor, "I don't know what we can do, but no, we had a little bit salted away, and here." And he pressed some bills into Ken's hand. Glenn and Ken barely knew each other. They just lived on the same road. He was town. Ken was newcomer. They had almost nothing in common. They had little cause or occasion to speak, and Ken wondered why this was happening, but he understood also what Glenn was doing. That's mighty generous of you, Glenn, but the insurance will take care of the money. I just can't. And Ken tried to return the money, but Glenn wouldn't take it. It's good to know folks like you are out there when we need them, said Ken. They were still standing in the door, neither one sure what the other one should do, when little Katie, Glenn's 10-year-old, saw a sheep poking through the kitchen door and squealed with delight. "You want to say hello?" said Ken. So they came in, and Ken squatted down to introduce them. "She's going to have a lamb soon." "Can I have her?" Katie said impetuously. "No, Katie," said Glenn. "You know that Mr. Joyce needs those lambs for his business." But Ken cocked his head for a moment and heard her words, and a little bell went off in his head. "Why not?" said Ken. I don't mean to keep, but seeing as how I have so little room and so many to take care of, if your dad doesn't mind, maybe you could be my partner in a month or two." "Well, Ken, I don't know about this," said Glenn. "I don't mind, but she's just 10 years old." "Oh, really, Glenn, it would be a help. You have a little bit of a yard out back. In a little more than a month, I'll have a dozen lambs here and no way to take care of them. This way I have a chance, and the lamb has a chance, and the little girl has a chance to get to know an animal. The way I see it, at least somebody comes out ahead, and come March, you can help with the lamb, okay, little lady?" And she said, "Yes." Well, the next day, Glenn's cousin Bernard came by. He brought a case of Maggie's famous canned goods, applesauce, relish, sour pickles, even real mincemeat. He said how much he was sorry and how he could help, and he just happened to bring his 11-year-old niece along. Ken did not need instructions. Come New Year's, an assortment of folks that just happened by, and somehow each one had a little something for the larder or for the new barn, and each one also had a boy or a girl between 9 and 13, and somehow everything was going to work out. Ken had wondered, being the newcomer he was, how these people had survived for so long out here in the rural world where there's not enough money and little help. He was figuring it out. Out here, even the best of times were never quite enough. People just found a way. They pitched in, they begged, they borrowed, but they never stole. As in nature, so in life. For every taking, there is a giving. Blessings cost and burdens pay. Life isn't about winning or losing, but about giving and receiving. And Ken thought maybe those wise men were wiser than he realized. And so ends the story. Gentlemen, would you bless us with music?
I thought I did what's right. I thought I had the answers. I thought I chose the surest road, but that road brought me here. So I put up a fight and told you how to help me. Now just when I have given up, the truth is coming clear. You know better than I. You know the way. I've let go the need to know why, for you know better than I. If this has been a test, I cannot see the reason, but maybe knowing I don't know is part of getting through. I try to do what's best, and faith has made it easy to see the best thing I can do is put my trust in you, for you know better than I. You know the way. I've let go the need to know why, for you know better than I saw was the sky. I saw a bird and thought that I could follow, but it was you who taught that bird to fly. If I let you reach me, will you teach me? For you know better than I. You know the way. I've let go the need to know why. I'll take what answers you supply. You know better than I.
The old year has passed away. Is that the name of the chorale that you played? Actually, for those of you who don't know, you could probably not hear the chorale tune itself because it was embedded inside the embellishments that J.S. Bach wrote. It was a style of the time. But I like the old year has passed away as though it died, which in a sense I guess it did. Every week on a conventional Sunday, I lift up the names of those who have died. Liberal religionists have a problem. We're really good at happiness, we're bad at sadness. And I think we have to be better at being sad, in the sense that we should own it, honor it, and that we have gifts that we receive from others, and we also have things we lose, loved ones. And so it is my custom, following in the tradition of the Jewish community where I worship from time to time, to lift up those whose lives have come to an end this year or in years past. Because death is part of the whole. The old year is passing away, the new one is coming. The day is already at noon, it's half dead. And yet there'll be another one promptly coming tomorrow. And so when we lift up death, we are giving honor to that which was and that which endures. And so for my prayer today, I'd like us to focus at this end moment in the year, this very last day of this arbitrary thing we call 2017, on those near to us, but perhaps also those near to you, whose lives reached their conclusion at this time and who still endure. In this church, we lift up the name of Robert Potts and Connie Francis and Terry Harper, of Bobby Ewell and Maureen Munger and Marcia Birch and Joyce Maxine Ward and Bunny Buchan. Doubtless other names known to you and to this church, but not known to me. We wish to lift up their names because in their names is a life and in their life is a gift, and the gift continues to be present with us. In that same Jewish tradition where they ordinarily say a prayer called the Kaddish, there is another one that I use every week. It is called El Malei Rakamim, which means God filled with mercy. El Malei Rakamim Shokein Bimromam. God filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights. So it's an imploring of the greatness. Bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekhinah, your presence. The wings. I want you to think of the sheltering wings. Isaiah speaks of being lifted up on wings as with eagles, that somehow when we imagine safety, it is the shelter of something strong that wraps its wings around us and gives us shelter and shade. Bring proper rest beneath the wings of your presence to the souls of our beloved who have gone to their eternal place of rest. May you, who are a source of mercy, for as in that tradition and Islam, God is referred to as Rahum, Rakamim, the merciful. May you, who are a source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally. What a beautiful notion, to be sheltered eternally and to bind their souls among the living. In other words, that they are not completely gone, that their souls still inhabit our lives. And even when we surrender our bodies, our souls will still be present in the lives of others. That there is this continuity, what the Christian community calls the communion of saints, where the quick and the dead live together here, not just there. Bind their souls among the living that they may rest in peace. I should like to think we would all want to depart this life with the confidence that we have given the best gift we could, and that it can rest with the living even as we cease to be them. What else can we ask of our lives? Is that we surrender it with a sense that we have given something of value, that we have made the world a little better. I once put at the end of my Christmas letter, make the world glad you were there. Isn't that what we're here to do? And this prayer asks that we can be at peace because we are connected, the living and the dead. They really do exist, and guess what? We're all going to be one of them one day. Let's give them their due because we wish to be given ours. And only when that is true, when we can sense that we can be at rest because we are never fully absent from one another, only then can we say that word, Amen, which means, may it be so. Here at the end of the year, I lift up my heart to those whose lives have been completed in our midst, but whose gift of life remains ever present. We see them in the presence of this building. We see them in the presence of these people, all of whom have within them and in their faces, in their voices, their parents and grandparents. We cannot be present one to another without all of them being in our midst. As we ponder this moment and the end of this year, we ponder those who preceded us in life, but nonetheless are present to us in life that we can only sense inwardly, though gone from our eyes and absent from our ears, no longer palpable to our hands and arms, in the mirror, in the world, in the recollections that life affords. They are ever present. And this gift, this ultimate and final and most magnificent gift, the one that we receive forever, for this gift we are truly grateful. And for this gift, we say, Amen. And so may it be. Before we sing our last hymn, this wonderful New Year's hymn out of the African American tradition, I remind you that next week I'll be back in that pulpit. It will be church again, and we'll feel churchy. But after church, there will be a meal that my wife and I delightfully provide every year at this time. A vegan menu of lentil soup and fresh bread to fortify you on a cold day and get you to stick around and help us take down the decorations. I will hope that some of you will be there to eat, to share, because it is our blessing and our delight to give it to you. And if you'd like to help serve on that Sunday, let me know, because we can always use a little more help. So let's gather ourselves as we sing a wonderful hymn at the very end of our hymn book. And I think it's number 350, The Ceaseless Flow of Endless Time. I'll say a word after that, and then Lee will play his postlude. Thank you. remember to be doers of the word, not just merely hearers, those who look into the perfect law of liberty and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, and they will be blessed in the doing. And remember that this day, though the last day of the year, is not the only day, but is like every other day, one that the Lord has made. Let us ever rejoice and be glad in it. Amen and amen.